but you know, I so much appreciate it. I remember that Marshal DeVore, we gave him a title in 10 years ago, in 2012 in Granada, and we asked him to present a lecture, whatever did science do for pain? And it was a very humorous lecture, but also a very serious lecture. And always I'm thinking about this lecture in my daily practice, because, you know, the science studying pain faces the apparent contradictory from a let's say, from an objective point of view, studying a phenomenon that is in essential characteristics with subjectivity and privacy. And in the daily practice, we always have to trial and error with all those patients. And in due time, we have seen a huge progress in the last 40 years during my practice, offering lots of modalities, opportunities, pharmacologies, but the results are still poor. Now you presented a very nice lecture, giving us another clue to the possibility of a solution for at least some patients. So my lecture is not, don't get the wrong impression, it's not opposing, it's a complementary lecture to not over-excellent the results out of science. It is, I think, important to present as a very simple clinician, as I am, to present you my observations, and you present your observations. And that may be a translational, very nice thing. So this, I will have a short presentation. I tried to get it short. And it's just, the meaning of this presentation is to keep you thinking and give you some ideas, and I cannot go in all the details, but I hope your mind will be changed and you will think maybe a little bit different. So, I took a challenging thing. What does it mean to differentiate between peripheral and central neuropathic pain? Why do we? Is it the location, the etiology? Is it suggested there are two systems of pain generators or mechanisms? Are there still very, very, very high transitional problems from basic science to the pain? And what is the evidence? Is this, I mean, the evidence to differentiate between the two? Is it FDA restrictions? Is it pharma companies who want to promote to get it approved by the FDA, etc., etc.? And what are the consequences of treatment? So, one of you last night was, you know, where are the impulses coming from? I see Sherlock Holmes. So central and peripheral, no, the difference. You see, the definitions are exactly the same. I think it should be replaced by another definition, because that's the way I feel it in the clinical point, from the clinical point of view. because, as you can see, it is an effective emotional and motivational quality. It is not like vision. When I see Professor Huijgen there, you can see him also. But pain, you cannot see in an objective way. So, we don't want to be disease-oriented, but patient-oriented. And don't consider medicine as a cognitive, rational enterprise. Combine it with 4,000 years of experience and observe pain with a more holistic view. Think different. You see all the apples. And when I was in Taiwan, they have the acer. There was one acer. What we see here is the stimulus response, and everyone noticed this one from Traité de Dom. And he didn't publish the book, by the way, only after his death, because Galilei, who said the world is round, was tortured and imprisoned for 3 years or so. So he was very afraid to have problems with the Catholic Church in those days. Now the specificity, that is also, there was never thought that there were pain receptors, but at one moment, peripheral pain nerves, specialized peripheral nerve endings, were combined with pain sensation. But it did not explain that when you are healing, that the pain could still be there. So then, my fellow eminent Professor Noordenbos, a neurosurgeon, he was writing a book, Pain, in 1959, and what he observed was in post-herpetic pain. He described the patient, and they get the nerve almost on all sides, and it didn't help. And then he thought there must be something else. So he thought there may be a different thing between the myelate A delta fibers and the velocity conduction through C fibers that is making a pattern. And that was, of course, the beginning of that one. And that was the beginning of the gate control. So, to my surprise, although we have huge amounts of progress in research, you see, for me, this is the pain picture. There's that little boy who was looking at his feet after 350 years. It doesn't mean nothing to me as a clinician to see something like, this time. Of course, it is giving us some pharmacological targets, perhaps. At least we are trying. But this is what basically is the fact. This was William Harvey. He was the first one time, 300 years, said, the heart is a pump. And thereby, he was the first physiologist. And thereby, he was trying to explain life out of death. He divided the body, and we do still the same. We divide the body into molecules, into mechanisms, into membranes. The membranes, the holes open, the ions go in or out, and the membrane closes. So if you look from the clinical point of view, we see, let's say, nerve damage. That could be all kinds of causes. What we see then is pathophysiology. We see the mechanism. So here you see, this is just randomized mechanisms. You see many mechanisms in the same disease and in different diseases. The signs and symptoms are causing the pain syndrome. But what is the connection between the mechanisms and the signs and symptoms? So, pain medicine has become more and more powerful scientific, depersonalized. The care of patients has become scientific. That means that you overvalue the science. It's a meaning that the mechanism should not be perceived in functioning in isolation. There is a very poor relationship with pain severity, signs and symptoms, and mechanisms. So there is the neuromatrix is in fact, that is what already Professor before explained. The neuromatrix is the physical self, and the neurosignature is above somewhere in your head, in your brain. And you have these kind of networks. But pain is a quality of all senses. That is already what Aristotle has told us during the 450 years before Christ. It is opposing to love. So, the internal perception and the standard extroceptive perception of processes is not oriented to publicly available objects. It is Kafkaesque. It's a myopic view, seeing the human body really as a conglomerate of mechanisms and molecules. Pain is the only reality. And it doesn't mean if the pain is perhaps imaginary. And this is what you see. We see as a clinician, we see, they call it pain imaging in the lectures. There's pain imaging. Can you make an image of pain? No, they say no. It's the location. So I thought once I had a patient say, I've been everywhere, and in the end, with my pain, and in the end, the doctor said the pain is between your ears. So it was only helpful for me to show him that the pain was not between his ears, but behind his eyes. And he was very satisfied with the explanation. But it's a little bit like John Lennon. No hell below us, only above us, only sky. So we have to think a little bit different. Maybe there are some systems that are overlooked now, like a repertoire priority system, virtual reality, etc., etc., ecological model. Perhaps pain is an illusion, a kind of default habituation or adaptation, as you can call it. Pain is in the nerve, but is that so? So, for coming to treatment, these are, everyone is used to use the guidelines. That evidence-based medicine, it's very, very good, and it's very worthwhile. But, if it gives light into the dark, it gives a direction for your treatment. But only a drunken guy claims it. And RCTs, for example, where our drugs are based on, are only performed on diseases and mechanisms. Well, the results have to be applied on patients. And patients' characteristics are never considered, are only considered as the results, as something that could disturb the results. Instead of providing valuable extra information. strictly defined diagnostic inclusion criteria. The patient really seems to be alone amidst the medical technology, paper guidelines, and statistical figures. And what about the uniqueness of patients' needs, preferences, emotions? Are they to be neglected? Because when we use, for example, a drug like pregabalin and a calcium, an alpha-to-delta calcium blocker, then it doesn't work in the clinic. It is for said in the trials, because we're not treating those unique selected patients. We treat all kinds of patients that were for 90% excluded through the trial. And coming to treatment, I mean, we now know that paracetamol and NSAIDs doesn't work. Unset, as Marshall showed us, it may be a referred nociceptive pain. But as you can see here, these are the main groups: anticonvulsants, opioids, and antiepileptics, and fusidic acid and NRI. And so what is the difference for me to differentiate between central and peripheral neuropathic pain if it comes to drugs? They're all the same, except for maybe some topical applications. So central or peripheral neuropathic pain, this is better in clinical practice, I think almost here. The treatment of all kinds of neuropathic pain is almost similar and always is a trial of error and error. Everyone knows that. You start somewhere, and it is your intuition and your feeling that changes the drug treatment. It is not death, but life. And herein lies the best hope of relief. Think quality of life, behavior, and meaning. And your treatment has to be holistic and not always evidence-based mechanisms in a dualistic way to treat your patient. Thank you. I think there is no time for discussion, especially not with Prof, because I think we are all very hungry. And I think it's time for lunch, and we are all there. And this was not very scientific, so it was just a normal practice. So I just wanted to got the message. And, we see each other.
So lunch, and we have at the same time starting a symposium, lunch symposium from Lumibird. So you're invited to have lunch and sit here to listen if you'd like to have. Thank you.